AJ Green and bounce back wide receivers for the 2021 fantasy season. Welcome to the Football Guys Dynasty Show. And Jordan, great article recently put out. Bounce back players, bounce back wide receivers are a great avenue for Dynasty GMs to go towards finding value. Can't get much cheaper than AJ Green.
Yeah, points per target's like one of my favorite stats to exploit, either high or low. And we could see this high last year with DK Metcalf. You just knew midseason it was going to regress, and it did. And you can see when they're really low, they tend to bounce back. Again, that is assuming same amount of targets, which I think is really the thing you got to be concerned with. But 1.1 points per target, that's comedically low. And I think that speaks to, I said something on social media, I think it was last week, but either AJ Green's cooked or Joe Burrow struggles to throw over the deep ball. Right? One of those two things is probably true.
Well, AJ Green's an all-timer, and he looked frustrated, right? So there's probably at least part of that is the second aspect that you mentioned about a rookie quarterback and Joe Burrow, because Green's an all-timer. I mean, that would be one of the statements I would make is AJ Green, either you think he's done or he's a bounce-back candidate, if not qualifier full-on.
Yeah, and I'll say this too. Like this is the scratch-off mentality, right? And I think this is a SIG line of it's the early reveal. You'll know pretty early on. Like this isn't a Jeff Janis situation.
September, right? You'll know.
Right. You're going to know, and it might even be week 1, week 2. I mean, it's going to be early where you're going to know, like, hey, listen, he just can't play. Or
now,
like,
unfortunately, it's Kyler Murray, who I have sort of had a thing out for because he's an average passer so far. So is that something that's going to give? So what's going to happen? Like you said, it's assuming targets stay the same. And we're assuming that maybe there's quality quarterback play or higher level quarterback play than he got last year. Other variables too.
Yeah, and one thing too I would say is like the points per target's variable. It's really variable by wide receiver, and it varies year to year. It's not very predictive. And what you'll see is there's a ton of variance in quarterback too, and a lot of it's touchdown rate. And if you're missing long, deep passes at a high rate, that'll really bend that curve down to a low number. So that's one of the things I just like. I think AJ Green's really interesting from the perspective of he's an early reveal. You'll know. And like, there's a chance that last year wasn't his fault. And again, it takes a lot. Like he didn't produce well in terms of stats, but it takes a lot to get 18% target share. Like that's a big target share for someone that is not playing that well. So like something's amiss in terms of that. Right. So that would be one thing I would just say is like, he played well enough to earn an 18% target share, but he didn't convert very much of it. There's some problems with the yards per route run and all that stuff too. It's just a really interesting thing where it's either Burrow or it's either him. Maybe it's both, but something's amiss there in that formula. And I think we'll probably get an early reveal on it. Yeah,
and the good news for AJ Green is dirt cheap. I mean, I saw him go for like fourths this offseason, which, let's place it, you want early reveals, as you said. You want clarity of that roster spot. And one of my favorite things this offseason was 3rd and 4th round rookie picks, depending on formats. But I need clarity. I need something that I can't be taking a day 3 wide receiver that could sit there and be wide receiver 4 or 5, even though they had good training camp news. Like right. That doesn't mean anything for me when I get to a few weeks from now and I'm going to be wanting to churn and burn that spot. So AJ Green, like you just said, I mean, you get to week 1, if he looks like a shell of himself, you might be moving on right then. If right. DeAndre Hopkins is the man and it's an amalgam, or Rondell Moore is getting a lot of touches, Christian Kirk, is involved as he has been, and they're going 3-4 wide and AJ Green is just soaking up coverage, then that may be enough, digging into it. So I love the fact, and with wide receivers, and let's face it, AJ Green right now is an excess wide receiver. He's not a core guy. He's not in that top 4 or 5 of your depth chart, which means expendable, which means a short fuse there. And it's amazing with point per target how much things really recycle around a centric, tighter range. You get outlier seasons every once in a while. AJ Brown's on a really big track, or Tyreek Hill, you get some guys that do it for multiple years or a big part of their career. But we've seen that with touchdown rate with Aaron Rodgers too. So sometimes if you're connected in certain situations, it really helps you. But AJ Green, he's been average, slightly above average, somewhere in that zone. He was absolutely horrific. And like you said, something's got to give here. And if it's him, That's fine. Knowing that the answer is him and he's gone and he's toast and he's done, that's not a bad thing for your dynasty roster.
Yeah, I almost took us off the rails about like $1.55 into this. So now we're at 510. I think it's so interesting, both of the quarterbacks, right? Because you were a Kyler Murray fan coming out. I have questions about Burrow. I've said for a while that I think Mac Jones is a really interesting sort of arbitrage on Joe Burrow, just because all the stuff that Joe Burrow, like they both had elite core sets of assets in college, and we don't necessarily know how that's going to translate to the NFL, but it's the same bet. Essentially, I mean, they had a very similar, and there was some stuff that you could look at it on paper and in a blind resume, take Mac Jones's season over Burrow's on a per game basis. They're both their elite finishes there. So I do think it's interesting. Like, we have all these questions, and from a bigger picture perspective, I know we're talking about receivers, but from a bigger picture perspective, like, be really cautious on these quarterbacks until they actually do it.
Yeah, the Kyler Murray part that bothers me is he's coming off of so much. He made the we're doing right now, value plays and targets and overrated. And Kyler Murray was on my overrated for the Football Guys collaborative piece that's going to come out, and that's because it was so rushing centric. I mean, a quarterback, not Cam Newton, that has 8+, 10+ rushing touchdowns like he did, and so slanted with his fantasy production. Again, I would love it if Kyler Murray was the ultimate dual threat guy. He's not. He'd probably be, I think I figured it out. He'd be like mid-teens if you take his rushing down to a human level. And so I just have, Josh Allen is like the outlier of outliers, right? Of a guy that put it together passing wise, where he was rushing centric before that. Is Kyler Murray going to turn the corner? We've been waiting on Cam Newton his whole career. So I have a problem. I know it's the fast track. Jalen Hurts. Sorry, if you blow the doors off fantasy wise this year and you're running around, you are still in that same bucket. I don't care if you finish QB4 or 7 or 14 or whatever it is. Until you develop as a passer, I think you need to be a little skeptical, just because that's the nature of the position. I think Greg Cosell, like one of his stock lines I'll never forget, was at some point you have to drop back and deliver in the timing and rhythm consistently in the offense and passing game.
Yeah, well, that's the Lamar problem, right? I mean, that's right. That's
we still have that question
between the guys that we don't have questions about and the guys we do, right? That is it. And to be in a
we like rushing, but absolutely, when you combined it with good enough or above average, doesn't have to be elite passing.
Yeah, like that's the difference. I mean, that's the leap that Allen took, right? And he crossed a huge Rubicon there. I mean, it was just a huge jump. But Dak is there, right? Watson's there. All these guys that had rushing in their profile, but have turned into being plus assets as passers. That's the leap to what makes you great. And like, Kyler's not there yet.
And consistently great, not just great for 1 year, consistently great.
Correct. And that's, I mean, we think everyone's going to do it, and you and I were talking before the show. It's, hey, everyone's a sleeper. It's a really finite number. And we were, I think you and I have texted about this at some point, where we were talking about, how many teams would want to, if you gave them truth serum, would take Watson over their starting quarterback. And the number should be like 28 teams. Like, it should be a huge number, just because there's not many guys that get to that level. It's just it's a,
well, and they also don't become available ever.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
Do want to remind folks, the news this August with the preseason training camp, it seems like every day there's a new injury that we're going to be now monitoring. Rashad Bateman was a recent one over the last 24, 48 hours. And you want to sign up and be a part of that email update. All the news delivered, distilled down to what you need to know. It's got links to all the most recent articles, keeps you abreast of what's going on at footballguys.com. Free to join. And again, sign up at join.footballguys.com/dynasty show. So Jordan, give us another name, and I would encourage everybody to go check this out, talking about the bounce back wide receivers. You were looking specifically at at points per target, and some of your other data points there. Give us another name for 2021 that you are tracking.
It's funny. I was tracking N'Keal Harry, and just the number's so bad that it's, again, you just wonder how many targets he's going to get because it was so bad. That's really the thing. The skill in being a receiver is getting targets, and then kind of what happens with them tends to be highly variable from year to year. So the question is can he sort of get the targets? Well, I think if he gets the targets, it's going to be bounce back. And then all of a sudden we start hearing and seeing really good reports from him out of Patriots camp. So it does give me some optimism for him. A player that was largely has largely been written off, but 1.38 points per target, really low in terms of like some of the advanced stuff like yards per route run and that sort of stuff. 14% of the offense, just short of 14% of the target share last year. Again, if that number grows and they pass more and, he's better, right? There's an avenue there for him to be relevant that I think some of it was probably negative puck luck, like we like to call it, if you would think in hockey, just the way that the puck bounces. Some of that's negative puck luck for him. And that's a lot of what this stat is. So he's definitely one.
Is he another one that you're like our conversation about Damian Harris a few shows ago, if memory serves, that with Mac Jones, you'd be a little more interested in just the passing game in general than if Cam Newton were under center?
Yeah. And I think the offense looks different. And that's one where you could say, hey, what I really like is guys that have the ability to A, uptick in efficiency and B, uptick in volume. Now, how would that happen? Well, the uptick in efficiency, maybe he's better, right? More in sync with his quarterback, just gets better luck, all of those things. But I think the move from Cam Newton to Mac Jones might jump them in volume in terms of passing game stuff, especially down in the red zone. That's where you could really see a bounce back in terms of, if you look at these numbers and you kick in a touchdown or two, all of a sudden the number looks, much closer to what it should than where it is. So with that offense, I think it really changes. And, Aguilar's one there that I think is really interesting if it's Mac Jones. With Cam, if it's going to be this run-centric, 1980s thing, it's going to it's kind of torpedoes everyone. Whereas I think a team that has Mac Jones at quarterback could conceivably see, a top 36 receiver, a couple of top, 16 tight ends, something like that, and a top 24 running back pretty reasonably.
Yeah. And let's remember that Nelson Aguilar, he's on the retread. He's still, a reclamation project in relative terms as a former first round pick that took a while, really to get going. And, Kendrick Bourne, I mean, so they don't, Jacoby Myers, like they don't have heavy competition, what should be heavy competition for a first round pick, and it really comes down to Harry, if he is going to be the goods. And looking at career starts for first rounders through 2 seasons, he's on a rich man's Laquan Treadwell track. Like, this is not good. So I don't want to, again, the good point is he's cheap. The point is like what, 3rd round rookie pick? I mean, or if it's 22, 24 man rosters, waiver wire is a possibility. Certainly waiver wire, maybe by week 1, depending on how the training camp and how the preseason games goes. If Harry doesn't flash at all, you could see him churned out for the flavor of the day, flavor of the week. So that's not a bad bet, as you said, early clarity. Let's see how this goes. But I will say Nelson Aguilar also on this first 2 years, pretty brutal round 1 wide receiver front. The one guy that really worked out was Roddy White. He ended up he was a relic through 2 years, ended up turning it on year 3, top 24. And then he strung 5 straight wide receiver 1 seasons. So that's really the blueprint. And a pretty rare one, because Roddy White was a really good athlete, came from a small school, but Aguilar is another one. Darius Haywood-Bay ended up having, again, better seasons in year 3 and beyond. But it really is for Harry. The last point I'll make is it's put up or shut up. I mean, they're going to have to decide after year 3 here on his 5th year option, and I wouldn't have a lot of confidence or faith in that. But like you're saying, I mean, the bet is so cheap and affordable. When in doubt, I mean, just go down on really strong pedigree like N'Keal Harry. Give us one little preview before we get off of this on one more name or one more nugget from your article that people can check out.
I think Jeudy's really interesting. Jeudy's fascinating for me from so many different perspectives. I just wonder if the volume's ever going to be there for a true difference-making team, and if it's going to be a true difference-making dynasty asset. And especially if it's going to be Bridgewater, if it's going to be Bridgewater, that kind of signals to you what their offense is going to look like. It's not going to be this aggressive thing. I think that they should try lock and see what happens. But my concern ultimately is with Jeudy is the overall volume. But again, 1.41 points per target. That number should be around 1.7, 1.8. That's about the range that number should be at. And you see it be a little bit higher with some of the leader guy, with like the top 24 guys, it'll be up 1.8, 1.85 in that range. So it's a pretty sizable decrease. And a lot of that, there was some drops in there. There was some, there's some stuff that I highlighted in the article about some on target throws with him and that sort of thing. You can go check it all out. But yeah, he's one that it's really fascinating because even if he does get like an uptick, I struggle to see how he's going to make a meaningful difference given what I think his volume projection could be.
Yeah, I think competition for targets is going to be a struggle for Jeudy, who again he's on a success track. I do like the trajectory combined with the pedigree he's on, but pretty ambiguous for this year specifically. And I always think that's important to look at. Maybe is this a guy that I'm looking to buy, later in the season or in January, as opposed to now? What if they get that quarterback change next year? Cortland Sutton's a free agent, so he could be gone as well. So competition for targets, and then you also say, what's the upside of this passing game? The macro, can they really produce a top 20, top 24 wide receiver when, one guy may not dominate that much and we're attached to a tier, let's say 3/4 quarterback situation? That is not the optimal historical equation. Do want to remind you, the Football Guys mobile app is back for 2021. You get all those custom projections, dominate your waiver wire, trading, and having your synced rosters in there. It's on the Apple and Google Play stores. It is separate from your Football Guys subscriptions. We do get some things over at customer support about that. But man, it optimizes your drafting environment, whether it's redraft or anything you got going on before the season, as well as those must-have tools in the regular season for your existing teams. Let's go over to some Dynasty trades of the week. Had some interesting ones, and I wanted to start out with a Justin Jefferson trade. We haven't talked about him a ton in these trades over the last 3-4 months. Obviously, he's a huge cornerstone element, monster career track arc through year one. And it looks like he avoided a poor scenario in terms of landing on his shoulder, sprained AC joint. Looks like it's not really at this time going to project to cause him to miss regular season time. So we can breathe a little easier with Jefferson there. But he was traded in a stock one quarterback league for Josh Jacobs, Diontae Johnson, and 302 for a draft that has not occurred yet this year. Big Jacobs fan in the house with Jordan here. What do you think about Diontae Johnson, and what do you think about the package for Jefferson?
Give me Jefferson. He's just, his floor is so high, and once you get a receiver that you kind of know that they're that elite, that's something that you can really bank on and build your team around. So I would take him, and I think it's a step. I like Jacobs. I think it's a step down. I think you're taking a big value loss. I mean, you're trading in a start one league, you're trading basically a first round startup pick for, a couple of mid round. I mean, a couple, I don't know what, I think in my most recent stuff that I was looking at for super flex, I think Jacobs was going 4th, 5th round. So you're looking, 3rd, 4th, somewhere in there for him and start one. And then Johnson's going later and a third, right? I mean, it's a big loss for me.
Yeah, blue chip guys are tough to replace, especially having a guy his age. Let's face it, a lot of the core wide receivers right now, a little bit on the older side. Jefferson, you're pretty much getting the whole thing. So that stability, again, this is not a completely one-to-one, but the thought process here, it could be like Mahomes and Superflex in the sense of there's a long runway here that you could encompass the whole thing of A, insulation, B, production, C, profile. So there's a lot of security at a position where wide receiver, if you don't have 2 or 3 of those guys, you could be lost in the woods a little bit. All right. What do you think about a rebuilding scenario? This is super flex and shifting from maybe situational plays, short-term plays at running back here, but I wonder if this is the right deal and is this the right time? So those are a couple points to think of with this trade. We've got Chase Edmonds for Mike Williams and a 22 second. Would you be shopping Edmonds now? Would you wait till the season? Do you think that's going to work his direction with James Conner there? And Williams in the second as the return.
If he's successful, are you ever going to be able to pull down a first?
It feels like the window was a year or two ago, right?
Yeah.
That maybe you would have had that glimmer. It seems like the shine is off of him a little bit from that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think it would take an almost elite, week 1, week 2 type performance for that primacy effect to really set in. And it's to move his right. That it doesn't matter if it happens in week 7 a lot of times.
Do you think do you think the Connor addition, like, is he gonna be close to the Drake role we saw previously? Do you think Edmonds is gonna say, go sit over there, it's my job? Like, both healthy, how do you think that plays out?
My initial reaction to that was, I think this is an Edmonds job. I was the football guys projections again. There's a bunch of people projecting, so they're smarter at sort of projecting these situations than I am. They project more touches for Connor on the ground, and I think if that's going to be the case, right, you're in a situation where I don't know what type of ceiling that Edmonds has, and if you're trying to look for a flippable asset, if you're rebuilding, Mike Williams probably isn't going to do a whole lot for you in that. I like him from sort of an NFL perspective. I think he offers you some stuff, but probably not in fantasy is that impactful. I hope the Bills sign him up in free agency next year on a cheap deal. That's what I'm rooting for. But I just don't know how much there is a difference maker. I'll say, can you go second to first? Right? Can you do this deal where you go second to first and you take out, maybe it's just Edmonds, right? Maybe it's, you don't take Williams back. You just take, you give Edmonds in a second for a first. When I think about these trades, I think it's a fair value thing. And I don't know if you're going to get a bigger out. I think the aspect to look at this trade too is how do you sort of get the possibility for an elite piece coming back? And I think going that second to first is a big deal, especially if you want to make a bet against Edmonds.
Yeah, one good thing, I would pivot from Williams to something else, a different running back. I mean, I would rather take, give me a guy, a tail, as you would say, and could that be a Tony Pollard, Gus Edwards? Jefferson, is probably in that late second or third round range, which Mike Williams is, I would guess. But that second at least looks a little better in Superflex. You could at least use that with another second to get into the first. That could end up being early in the round. You pivot to a first the following year. So I don't think the return is bad. I think your initial question, which is, will he ever be truly worth a first? And how much do you have to add to him to get there if you can from here forward? And let's face it, if it turns into an amalgam committee, that shine is completely gone. So I just don't know if that's going to ever return, which could be a little bit of a dangerous scenario, because this is elevated from just a true committee guy or injury away guy. Like, this is elevated from that. And if that's what he ends up being, if Connor gets goal line, if he ends up getting, 187 touches or whatever, this might be the best you can get going forward. We got another one, and this is another strong young wide receiver, not Justin Jefferson in terms of his outlook or the track he's on so far, but we have DK Metcalf in a one. Actually, doesn't matter. It's a
these are fighting words. You just put Metcalf below Justin Jefferson. You better watch out.
Yeah. You can go at Parsons at footballguys.com via email for Najee Harris and Devonta Smith.
Wow.
So 101 plus. 101 plus what? 107 to 10.
I wish the receiver coming back was someone other than Devonta Smith. I wish that was the answer to this question, and then it would be pretty easy for me. First round running backs, just so much difference making potential. And
but the Hall of Fame game, Jordan.
Isn't like, so I wrote this and this is coming out this week or in the next couple of days in the receiver article, the value series that you talked about. Is DK Metcalf better than Tyler Lockett? Maybe, right? Like that's the question.
He's certainly bigger than him.
That's
bigger. Confirmed.
Right, he's bigger.
He's better. He's better at interception coverage than Lockett. That's for sure.
He is absolutely better. He's much better in the open field tackling game. But from a production standpoint, like, he hasn't totally locked down being a wide receiver one yet. And I know that's Like the argument between him and Jefferson.
Now what's your email address so people know?
chadparsons@gmail.com.
There it is. Good one.
So yeah, I mean, that's the that's the interesting thing about this. I don't know. I'll take the asset back and take the Harris side, but I don't love being in the Devonta Smith business.
Yeah. Smith dinged up. That really cooled some of the look at the routes he's running. Look at the separation he's getting in 7-on-7s discussion. That was back a few weeks ago, and you kind of wonder. Again, I like Jalen Reagor as well, but I just wonder. All this is pinned on Jalen Hurts. That is there a top 36 guy on that team based on the offense that's going to occur and based on the quarterback. But yeah, that it might, if you're looking to flip Smith after the deal, I really am reticent to take on players. I recently took on Kenny Galladay, didn't want him. Don't want him. Can't win with him. What's the Mike Singletary quote?
Yeah.
I want winners. I don't think Galladay's a winner. So I was like, oh, I love the deal. Otherwise, I can flip him for a first and maybe something else. Proved a little more difficult than that. Right. Ultimately, I
maybe
did
a third plus.
But you hate doing that, right? I mean, you hate taking a player like you even if it's a player less valuable. Give me the guy I like. Give me the guy that I actually think I can win with. The guy I want on my team.
Right.
All right. We've got one more here. We've got a 14-teamer, Nick Chubb for DeAndre Hopkins and a third next year.
Wow.
What do you think of? Is this the classic, hey, it's fair, just whatever position you want to resculpt your team to?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think Chubb can make. I think it's fair. By the way, I don't know if we've talked since Nick Chubb signed his extension. I don't know when that was last week, but congratulations to him. We've been fans for a while now, and I'm happy for him that he got paid. Not sure I would have paid quite the amount of, it's actually, if you sort of compare it to, if you accept the premise of, hey, we're going to pay a running back, the contract actually doesn't look that bad compared to some of the other contracts signed. So,
and if you think of touches and market share of an overall offense, I mean, paying a guy 10, 15 million a year when a wide receiver is going to get less, like what, a half or a third of the targets that a running back will get total opportunities.
Yeah. And there's been some research by PFF. I haven't delved totally into it, but that he actually does make a difference. Like there's not many running backs that make a difference in terms of expected points added. He does. So I thought it was pretty interesting in terms of what it is. I got to dive into a little bit more, but I'm happy for Nick Chubb. I think this is fair. So
the interesting thing is, obviously, there's about 3.5 year age difference. I think it's 29 versus 25 and change right now. But I mean, could they be on similar trajectories of, prime window of production remaining? Hopkins, to me, he's already kind of reformatting his game, which I love to see. I think he's going to age relatively gracefully because he's already kind of like, I could totally see a Larry Fitzgerald type track with Hopkins. Like the sticky hands, already used to being a guy draped all over him and being sneaky, like 3 years from now, we're still talking about him as like, he's not worth, even like an early second anymore, but you're still starting a guy. Like, I feel like you're still plugging and playing him, maybe not in the same, wide receiver 1 or 2 spot on your team. Maybe it's wide receiver 3 or 4, but you're still a good team and he's a part of it that you're happy to have him.
Yeah, I do think he ages gracefully, and he's never been a huge athlete either, right? I mean, it's never has been how he's won. So, he has won more as a technician and that sort of stuff.
Wasn't Keenan Allen the guy that bristled like when they were like, "Oh, Keenan Allen's not a good athlete." And I think I thought I read something that he basically made a remark like, I guess route running is not an athletic trait. Right. And he just showed pictures of guys turning around DBs. but he's another one. So athlete. I actually like these guys that aren't like monster athletes because it means they don't have to adapt their game. They've kind of been used to getting by on guile and technical aspects more so than, well, I'm 22. I'm just faster and bigger than everybody else.
Right. Cooper Kupp's another one. I mean, he's not the same level, but he's been that guy since we saw him at the Senior Bowl. And
he was already 24. When we saw him at the Senior Bowl, he's like 23.8.
Remember, he was talking analytics with us. I don't know if you were there. It was me, and it was, but he was definitely talking analytics. It was fun.
Yep. All right, let's go to some quotes from the Footballguys Dynasty forums this week. and this is regarding T. Higgins. I think T. Higgins' upside is even understated by many, and I was so hesitant in a trade to let him go. And I wanted to include this one because I wanted to ask you about Jamar Chase has the heat. It seems like T. Higgins was a darling last year, kind of left behind. Do you kind of assess this as, I wouldn't be surprised either direction this depth chart goes, now or going forward, because it seems like everyone's anointing Jamar Chase already.
That's a shocking turn of events. We're anointing someone who hasn't done anything yet. I just, again, Chad Parsons at gmail.com. But what's the chance that that N'Keal Harry,
Tyler Boyd's better than both of them?
Well, there's that chance too. There's a range of outcomes for Jamar Chase that's 10, 15, I don't know, maybe 20% that he is N'Keal Harry, right? That he could just flat out fall on his face. I wouldn't bet that happens, but that's, in that type of scenario, Higgins has untapped potential. So I do agree with that. Again, he's been one we talked earlier about players that you just end up taking, and you just kind of deal with it, and you kind of hope to flip him later. I did that with T. Higgins in a league. Like, I took him at, like, he fell in a rookie draft like 210 or something last year. It was just like, he was absolutely the right pick, and I at the price was like, yeah, fine, like, I'll find it. It's been a year. Like, I haven't been able to exit. It's been a year. And so I'm sort of, I wanted to sell pre-draft, didn't happen. Wanted to sell whole offseason, hasn't happened. But I'm kind of open to the idea of, like, hey, he could, listen, Jamar Chase hasn't played football in a year. So let's be realistic about this. Isn't like the most seamless transition in the world. We don't know what that impact has. There's a lot of uncertainty with Jamar Chase that I don't think people are pricing in. I'm not saying he's bad, but I do think there's risk factors there that people probably aren't. And I think Higgins has shown that he's probably has the ability to capitalize on that. So does Boyd, by the way.
Well, yeah, and don't just, say go sit over there when a wide receiver gets on a year one success track, and yes, it's not, he didn't put up a Jefferson like season, but he has already avoided some of the graphic bust avenues that can occur within 12 months of being drafted. So he is not on that track. And I would remind folks, and you can always say that the guy you like is they don't fit in the quote unquote average bucket. But the average round one wide receiver, and I always remind people with Trevor Lawrence or last year Joe Burrow about the 101 drafted quarterbacks that nobody wants to hear because every year they're different. Well, Burrow wasn't that different. We'll see if Trevor Lawrence is that different. But round one wide receivers average like a wide receiver 65 finish. Mm-hmm. So you can say he's better than that, but I'm sure you could just start talking over and over again. Hopkins was wide receiver 68, just for a point of reference in year one. So to say that everybody is the outlier, no, I mean 65 or so. So let's cool our jets that if he's not the wide receiver one on this team, and you already said, let's see how Joe Burrow does, but he's got two other strong wide receivers on the same depth chart. And if he is not number one in the pecking order, I mean, where does he fit in? Is it an elite passing game? I know a lot of people think so, but if Burrow is not tier one, which I deem as top 8, top quartile there, then the odds of the number 2 guy finishing in the top 20 or 24 is pretty low. Is he going to be higher than Boyd, who's an established, mid-career guy that's no slouch? So I just think that there's some. You can like him as a profile. You can like some of the plays he makes, but it doesn't mean he's getting 125 targets, and it doesn't mean he's going to be wide receiver 17 this year. So be careful. The redraft, see, that's the part with Chase. Like, the redraft is just out of control.
Right. That's yes, I totally.
The redraft part of this, like, I'm comfortable with his profile and drafting him at 103, 104. I'm fine with that, but yeah. I'm not fine with redraft. You take him as your wide receiver 2. Straight bonkers. All right, another wide receiver here. Elijah Moore has the potential to be the best playmaker the Jets have had on offense in a long time.
It's not saying a whole lot, Chad.
I was going to say, who's their best playmaker? Jamison Crowder? Where are we? If you say Le'Veon Bell, well, remember that Jets offense that had like the quarterback situation from below the Earth's surface? That was they literally had this like 1 or 2 games where Le'Veon Bell got 38 carries for 86 yards.
Right.
It was completely brutal.
Right.
Nothing going on at quarterback. It was a little better than that Denver game where they had the wide receiver playing quarterback.
Right. Yeah, Brandon Marshall, I think would be one that might qualify.
I would say Chris Herndon, but we know that can't be.
We know that ain't true.
Still has his fans.
Yeah, I mean, listen. Here's the interesting part. I mean, if with all of the giant alarms just going off from Jets training camp about Elijah Moore, Mr. Top 10 veteran money guaranteed Corey Davis, who was top 8.
I'm right here, guys. I'm right here.
Just sitting over there being like, okay. And
I can play too. It was a bad. I just didn't get the looks in Tennessee. I was open. He was open,
and he had an excellent year from an efficiency perspective.
Yeah.
He just didn't. It wasn't a huge fantasy year.
He's
he
a
had
good player.
Excellent year. And so and it showed the NFL has sort of shown us that at least.
And again, this connects to a quarterback. I will just remind, for whether you like Crowder or Davis or Elijah Moore or, dare I say, Denzel Mims, who I just saw a beat reporter that said currently as it stands, he's wide receiver 6 on the depth chart.
Yeesh.
How does that taste? So yeah, I actually, people that are holding him aggressively and drafting him, some of these secondary drafts and stuff like that, be careful. That's how you get hurt. That's how you get an eye taken out. So Corey Davis, I would say you're connecting him to a rookie quarterback that probably finishes. I mean, most times out of 100, they finish in the 20s. So you're talking about a tier 3 or tier 4 passing game that if you don't sharpshoot the wide receiver 1, I will say the odds are it doesn't matter at all. It doesn't matter. Elijah Moore, if he's not the wide receiver 1, it probably doesn't matter in this offense. So you got to be super careful. And like you said, follow the money. They paid Corey Davis. Now at the time, they didn't know that they were going to draft Elijah Moore, but Elijah Moore doesn't exactly have a prototypical, you're going to be the alpha on your team either. And he's a rookie. So all this, be very skeptical. Have you seen some of these August rookie drafts, Jordan? I've seen Elijah Moore go like 9, 10.
That's rich.
It's rich.
Saw
him go over Sermon. Saw him go over some other guys too. All right, last one here. Ronald Jones, who we've actually discussed. I think we're in a little bit opposite ends. Not ends, but little slightly different perspective on Rojo. Ronald Jones is an underrated back, but he's not worth a first right now.
That's true.
Who's paying a first? Is that a real thing?
I don't think so. I like Ronald Jones, and it's worth noting where we both came from, which is a place of not liking Ronald Jones coming out
at all. And that's what was it?
You.
Was it 20? What class was that? 2018? Right? 2018 class, where it's like 8 running backs in a row that go off the board.
Yeah.
The penny draft.
Right, the penny draft. Royce Freeman, Kerryon Johnson.
Chubb.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That draft. And I didn't think very much of him coming out of college, and I've been pleasantly surprised, and I think you have been too. My concern with him is you've got a lot of, and I have the same concern about Fournette, which is even if they're like Fournette has the best the ability to do both things, but he's blocked on both sides. He's blocked by Gio in the receiving game. He's blocked by
that Gio signing is a thorn in the side of this whole thing. The machinery of the Tampa Bay juggernaut offense, Gio ruined it because if Fournette ends up being the passing back and he gets a hot stretch over Rojo or something, you've got something. But I have this feeling that Tampa Bay, we're going to look back at the end of the season and we're going to have a whole heck of a lot of wide receiver 2-3s, and like Gronkowski's going to be tight end 23, and every running back is going to have some games that you have no predictability, no confidence, but yet the perfect storm, the hot hand or whatever is going to happen. Gio's going to have some 8-catch game one time and put up 23 PPR points, but just you're not going to be able to predict any of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I would guess Mike Evans' season last year would be like an example, right? That a lot of people are down on him. Still a good player, had a good year, but you get Antonio Brown in the mix, Chris Godwin. Like, unless injuries occur, I think this is going to be a hot mess. There's cold mess, which is a bad offense, and it's a lot of committees. This is a hot mess, which is really good offense. Brady benefits, but who else is like a truly dominant player at their position?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, one of my sneaky, I don't know if you have sort of predictions or anything, but one of mine is I'm all in on Antonio Brown. Like, I think he could lead this team in targets. And I think that would surprise a lot of people, but he was pretty close to that in his half game sample last year.
So I have a team that it's my home league, and I've been in it for 25 years. And I had Cam Akers. It's a keeper league. I only keep 7, so it's not full dynasty. But I have Cam Akers and I have Deshaun Watson, and both of them were going to be keepers, and like they were going to be critical for me to compete. So I'm kicking it in. So I made a trade. I actually got a future first for Cam Akers. And in the deal, I was like, hey, can you just throw in Antonio Brown just to, balance out the rosters or whatever? And I'm probably
trading future picks in a keeper league.
Yeah. I got a 20.
How long did you have to argue that one to get that into the rule book? That sounds like a year rule.
It's been a while. So
first 3 years, you're like, all right, every year you keep one extra player. You're kind of getting him on this dynasty track is what you're doing.
We came backwards. It used to be like a 12-man keeper, and now it's down to 7.
That was too extreme for a lot of people.
Yeah. So
FFPC would blow their mind with 14 to be like 12. Whoa, slow down.
Yes.
Okay. I will say Ronald Jones, though, free agent next offseason. I think he will be viewed like a 1A, worst case 1B back in free agency. I think, but this year I think it's just going to be a mess. Unless something occurs, you need an injury somewhere,
right?
And it could.
Do you take a second and a injury away guy for Ronald Jones,
like Madison or something?
Madison.
Yeah.
I mean,
I'll do that.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Well, this is what's the line? Like I texted you something, and you were just like, "Well, you got 2 options. Like you have a 2-way go." I mean, like so that's the classic. Like, would you take Jamal Williams and what did you say a second?
Yes.
So
yeah.
I mean, so those sorts of calculus. I mean, you have to view him in buckets, right? Like it's Ronald Jones so good. Is the situation so good? And he is a player that you would say no to a similar player plus a pick.
Right.
And the answer should be no. It's pretty much that basic. All right. If you're into shows like this, you're a serious fantasy player. And we're getting to the serious part of the year. This is the part where we've got a collection. Every team pretty much is going to be in the mix now with preseason. And if you thought we've had some data points with injuries and moving pieces so far in the past couple of weeks, just wait till week 1. Wait till all the things that change. And you want to be a part of it with your winning fantasy football teams. You want to save the time. And the Football Guys premium membership is the way to do that. It's going to save you time. It's going to get you the edge. I've talked before. You want to sync your leagues and your rosters because that's how you save time on a weekly basis. Get your systems in check in August because the next 4 months after, you need to have this dialed in. The last thing you want to do is be missing available players. Sigmund Bloom does a great job outlining the players you need to look at in your league. And then guess what? You pop up your synced rosters and it highlights who is actually available in your league because prices and availability may vary. So you get the league winning information you need and guidance from a massive staff that has your best season in mind here for 2021. So we'll do the work and you do the winning. So go over to footballguys.com/join. In this episode, we discussed a lot about player value. We actually got Jordan to take a non-Josh Jacobs trade side. That was fun. I finally pigeonholed him in there. We talked about those bounce back wide receivers. We talked about getting clarity with those roster spots. And at the end, we even mixed in talking about the Jets a little bit, Ronald Jones, and of course, a pretty interesting passing game there with the Cincinnati Bengals. I am Chad Parsons. He is Jordan McNamara. And until next time, good luck in your Dynasty leagues.